I see you managed to get the Lotus back together again.
I disregard these jibes about our equipment, 007.
Are you aware of our ATAC system, 007?
ATAC, sir? Automatic Targeting Attack Communicator. Uses an ultra-low frequency coded transmitter to order our submarines to launch ballistic missiles.
5 days ago, our spy ship, St. George's, was sunk in the Ionian Sea.
Secure operation room!
Destruct ATAC system! She was equipped with ATAC. Now, if that transmitter were to fall into the wrong hands, it would render our entire Polaris fleet useless.
Every order could be countermanded.
Worse, our own submarines could be ordered to attack our own cities. We asked Sir Timothy Havelock, the marine archaeologist, to secretly locate the wreck. Before he could send in his report, he and his wife were killed by a Cuban hitman, Hector Gonzalez. The Greek police were able to identify Gonzalez from a description given to them by Melina, Sir Havelock's daughter. Isolate him and apply the necessary pressure to find out who hired him.
Oh, by the way, we haven't been properly introduced, Melina. My name is Bond. James Bond. Melina, look. You were lucky once, but they are onto you now. Please let me handle this. The Chinese have a saying. Before setting out on revenge, you first dig 2 graves.
I didn't think it would end like this.
We're not dead yet.
Roger Moore returns as James Bond in For Your Eyes Only, released in the UK on the 24th of June 1981 and produced on a budget of $28 million. It went on to gross $194 million worldwide, making slightly less than Moonraker, but more than The Spy Who Loved Me. Despite its strong box office takings, the reviews were very mixed. Critics and fans loved the more serious take on the famous 00 agent, but it was critiqued for its thin plot and long-winded running time. This would be the last Bond film distributed solely by United Artists, before they merged with MGM. The film saved United Artists from financial ruin. At the time of the film's release, the studio was still reeling from Heaven's Gate, a notorious $40 million bomb that was about to force UA into bankruptcy. With Bond doing very well at the box office, the studio was saved, and afterwards turned its focus towards more commercial films. The producers of the Bond series made a deliberate effort to bring the series back to reality. Despite the success of Moonraker in '79, they couldn't continue on that track because the films would only get more outlandish, and they felt the series needed to get back to basics and focus on a Cold War thriller storyline where Bond has to use his wits and gadgets to survive. Richard Maybaum was once again the script writer for the story, assisted by executive producer Michael G. Wilson. Much of the inspiration for the film's screenplay came from 2 Ian Fleming short stories, For Your Eyes Only and Risiko, and a key scene was borrowed from the Live and Let Die novel. The film marked a change in the production crew. Editor and second unit director John Glenn was promoted to main director, a position he would occupy for 4 subsequent films. This transition resulted in a harder-edged directorial style, with less emphasis on gadgets and large action sequences in huge arenas. Focus was placed on tension, plot and character in addition to return to Bond's more serious roots, but John Glenn still wanted to retain some of the humour that the series was known for. Peter Lamont, who had worked in the art department since Goldfinger, was promoted to production designer, replacing Ken Adams. Peter pushed for more naturalistic scenery, instead of the elaborate set pieces for which the series had been known. To achieve this push towards a greater sense of reality, which the Bonds certainly had, but there was less emphasis on technology and grand design. Production for Your Eyes Only began in September of 1980 in the North Sea, with 3 days shooting exterior scenes on the St George, and the interiors were shot later at Pinewood Studios. On the 15th of September, principal photography started in Corfu, which acted as the location for the Spanish villa. John Glenn opted to use local slopes and olive trees for the chase between Molina's Citroen 2CV and Gonzalez's men. The scene was shot across 12 days. 4 2CVs were used, with modifications for the stunts. One received a special revolving plate on its roof so it could get turned upside down. Bond veteran cameraman and professional skier Willy BOGNER Jr. was promoted to director of second unit filming for the ski footage. BOGNER designed the ski chase on the bobsleigh track, hoping to surpass his work on both On Her Majesty's Secret Service and The Spy Who Loved Me. To allow better filming, BOGNER developed both a system where he was attached to a bobsleigh, allowing to film the vehicle or behind it, and a set of skis that allowed him to ski forwards and backwards in order to get the best shots. Roger Moore was reluctant to film the scene of Bond kicking a car with Locke inside over the edge of a cliff, saying that it was Bond-like but not Roger Moore's Bond. Michael G. Wilson later said that Roger had to be persuaded to be more ruthless than he was comfortable with. Roger Moore was also challenged by his great fear of heights. He resorted to moderate drinking to calm his nerves. Later in that same sequence, Rick Sylvester, a stuntman who had previously performed the pre-credit ski jump in The Spy Who Loved Me, undertook the stunt of Bond falling off the side of a cliff. The stunt was very dangerous, since the sudden rope jerk at the bottom could be fatal. Special effects supervisor Derek Meddings developed a system that would dampen the force of the stop. For the Meteora shots, a Greek bishop was paid to allow filming in the monasteries, but the uninformed Eastern Orthodox monks were critical. After a trial in the Greek Supreme Court, it was decided that the monks' only property were the interiors. The exteriors and surrounding landscapes belonged to the local government. In protest, they tried to sabotage production as much as possible, hanging their washing out of their windows and covering the principal monastery with plastic bunting and flags to spoil the shots. The production team solved the problem with backlighting, matte paintings, and building both a similar monastery on a nearby unoccupied rock, plus a monastery set in Pinewood. With the cast, a number of the principal actors returned to play their established roles, such as Moneypenny, Q, Sir Frederick Grey, and General Gogol, the head of the KGB. The role of Bill Tanner as Chief of Staff was used to brief Bond in place of M, following the death of Bernard Lee. Tanner was played by James Villiers. The role of Tanner first appeared on film in The Man with the Golden Gun, although uncredited. James presumed he would play the role of M in subsequent films, and was disappointed not to be asked back, but the producers thought him too young for the role and wanted an actor in his 70s. Roger Moore yet again is back as James Bond. He had originally signed a 3-film contract with Eon Productions, which covered his first 3 appearances up to The Spy Who Loved Me. Subsequent to this, the actor negotiated contracts on a film-by-film basis. Uncertainty surrounded his involvement in For Your Eyes Only led to other actors being considered to take over, including Lewis Collins, known in the UK for his portrayal of Bodhi in The Professionals, and Michael Billington, who previously appeared in The Spy Who Loved Me as Agent Triple X's ill-fated lover. Eventually, however, this came to nothing, as Moore signed on to play Bond once again. Director John Glenn was relieved, because he didn't want the extra stress of handling a new Bond and directing his first 007 movie. French actress and model Carole Bouquet plays Melina Havelock, the daughter of marine archaeologists who were murdered while tracking down the ATAC's whereabouts. Bouquet had auditioned for the role of Holly Goodhead in Moonraker, but was unsuccessful due to her young age. Her voice is dubbed over in the movie, but there are no credits to suggest who dubbed her over, but it sounds like the same woman who provided the voice for the German lady in Jackie Chan's Operation Condor. Carole, however, did provide her own voice for the French dub. Julian Glover plays Aristotle Christatos, initially an ally to the British government, but is later revealed to be the main villain. He plans to expand his fortune by selling the ATAC to the KGB. Glover had been considered to play Bond in the early 70s, but eventually lost out to Moore for Live and Let Die. Topol plays Milos Colombo, Christatos' former smuggling partner, who assists Bond in the mission to prove his innocence. Topol was well known for his performance in Fiddler on the Roof, but to me he will always be the mad scientist Dr. Hans Zarkov from Flash Gordon. Lynn Holly-Johnson plays BB Dahl, an ice skating prodigy who is training with the financial support of Christatos. Lynn Holly was an ice skater before turning to acting. BB fancies James Bond as soon as she clocks eyes on him, but he politely turns her down, which was a good thing, because Roger was old enough to be her dad. Jill Bennett plays Jacoba Brink, BB's skating coach. Jill was sick with cancer at the time and needed some work to pay for the medication. Cubby helped her out by casting her in the role. Michael Gothard as Emile Leopold Locke, a Belgian hitman and associate of Christasos. He remains mute throughout the film, which was an odd decision, maybe done to create some mystery around his character. Cassandra Harris plays Columbo's mistress. At the time of filming, Harris was married to future Bond actor Pierce Brosnan, and the couple lunched with the film's producer Albert R. Broccoli during filming and attended the film's premiere. Barbara Broccoli kept a close eye on Pierce as a potential future Bond. Cassandra sadly passed away in 1991 due to ovarian cancer. John Wyman plays Eric Kriegler, an Eastern German Olympic-class athlete, and Aristotle's henchman and KGB contact. To me, he looks very much like He-Man. Charles Dance makes his first movie appearance as Claus, an associate of Locke. In 1989, he would play Ian Fleming in a television drama called GoldenEye: The Secret Life of Ian Fleming. And finally, in one of the oddest scenes in the Bond series, we have Janet Brown as Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who appears in the closing scene alongside John Wells as her husband Dennis. It's so bizarre, but also very funny when Dennis goes to grab some food and Margaret slaps his hand. The film opens with James Bond leaving flowers for his deceased wife, which was put in by John Glenn to create some continuity with the previous films, and a call back to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. James is picked up by a helicopter but is led into a trap. Blofeld has taken control of it. Bond manages to regain control and capture Blofeld, resulting in Blofeld being dropped down an industrial chimney. It's a ridiculous opening sequence. John Hollius plays the bald villain in a wheelchair, basically Blofeld, but he could not be identified as such because of the legal reasons surrounding the Thunderball controversy, with Kevin McClory claiming sole rights to the Blofeld character, a claim distributed by Eon. They kill him off in the film as a way to say F you to McClory. The British spy boat, the St George's, which holds the Automatic Targeting Attack Communicator, known as ATAC, a system used by the Ministry of Defence to communicate with and coordinate the Royal Navy's fleet of the Polaris submarines, is sunk after accidentally trawling an old naval mine in the Ionian Sea. A marine archaeologist, Sir Timothy Havelock, has been asked by the British to secretly locate the St George's. However, the head of the KGB, General Gogol, has also learnt of the fate of the St George's and notifies his contact, Cuban hitman Hector Gonzalez in Greece, ordering him to murder Havelock and his wife. At MI6, James Bond receives orders from the Ministry of Defence, Sir Frederick Gray, and Chief of Staff Bill Tanner to retrieve the ATAC before the Soviets, as the transmitter could order attacks by the submarines Polaris' ballistic missiles. Following this, Bond goes to Spain to find out who hired Gonzalez. While spying on Gonzalez's villa, Bond spots someone has passed on a large sum of money to Gonzalez. Bond is spotted and captured by his men, but manages to escape as Gonzalez is killed by an arrow as he dives into the pool. While on the run, he bumps into the assassin, Melina Havelock, and the two escape. With the help of Q, Bond identifies a hitman in Gonzalez's estate as Emile Leopold Locke, and Bond heads out to Italy to find Locke. There, Bond meets his contact Luigi, a well-connected Greek businessman and intelligence informant, who introduces him to Aris Christasos. Aris tells Bond that Locke is employed by Milos Colombo. After Bond meets and escorts the figure skater BB Dahl to a biathlon course, a group of 3 men, including East German biathlete Eric Kriegler, chase Bond, trying to kill him. Bond escapes but has to fend off another attempt on his life, where he goes to bid farewell to BB in an indoor ice rink. Bond returns to his car but finds Luigi has been killed off, with a dove pin in his hand. Bond then travels to Corfu in pursuit of Colombo. At the casino, Bond asks Christasos how to meet Colombo, not knowing that Colombo's men are secretly recording their conversation. After Colombo and his mistress argue, Bond offers to escort her home with Christasos' car and driver. The two then spend the night together. In the morning, her and Bond are ambushed by Locke, and she is killed off. Bond is captured by Colombo's men before Locke can kill him. Columbo then tells Bond that Locke was actually hired by Christassos, who is working for the KGB to retrieve the ATAC. Bond accompanies Columbo and his crew on a raid on one of Christassos' opium processing warehouses in Albania, where Bond uncovers naval mines similar to the one that sank the St. George's, suggesting it was not an accident. With the movie cutting back on big elaborate visual effects and set pieces, it keeps the use of miniatures and optical work to a minimum. It has the traditional use of front projection for the helicopter opening set piece, driving inside the cars, and the skiing and rock climbing sequence. The front projection work was always pretty good in the Bond films, especially during the 80s. It often blended well with the live action material. It was the best way to achieve the shots without having to use blue screen. Carol Bouquet had sinus problems and couldn't do the underwater shots, so instead they shot the footage on a soundstage at a slow frame rate, with fans blowing their hair and optically adding bubbles to simulate the underwater second unit footage. I never knew that before reading up on this film. It works so well and would fool most people. For the ridiculous opening sequence with Bond and Blofeld, Derek Meddings had to use a foreground miniature for the helicopter flying through the industrial area. Because there was no way for the helicopter to enter the building, the miniature proved helpful for it to do so. The destruction of the St. George is to the high standards you have come to expect from Derek Meddings and his crew. There is the odd shot that you can tell it's a miniature, but I love seeing this stuff and it blends well with the footage shot on location. Film composer Bill Conti takes the reins providing the soundtrack. He was recommended by John Barry, who was unable to provide the score due to being a tax exile at the time and couldn't spend the required number of days in the UK to record the music. Bill was well known for his work on Rocky, and he brings over his traditional style with a mix of disco beats and contemporary pop music to the soundtrack. At first you may be put off by the inclusion of the disco sound, but trust me, it will soon grow on you. The parts of the soundtrack that really impress is when Bond and Melina search for the St. George in this submarine, and the Bond theme has a great bass line to it. The car chase as well provides a thrilling sound mix, with Bill Conti almost remixing the Bond theme. I make use of it in my opening trailer. It has this great pop sensibility to it, a perfect track to listen to if you are going for a run. Conti doesn't make use of the Bond theme in its complete form throughout the film, just uses parts when the scene is introduced or sprinkles it in during the action scenes. In the past, when the theme kicked in, it often sounded like it was just copy and pasted, and it didn't match the sound quality of the score intended for that film. The theme song was written by Bill Conti and Michael Leeson and performed by Sheena Easton. The song was later nominated for both an Academy Award and Golden Globe in 1982. Easton also made Bond film history as the first and to date only artist to perform the theme song on screen during the opening title sequence. An interesting bit of trivia: Roger Moore revealed in the commentary for the film that Sheena was on TV in the States to promote the film on a chat show, but never mentioned the movie, which really pissed off Cubby Broccoli. Originally, the band Blondie was approached to write and perform the theme song for the film. They produced a song called For Your Eyes Only. However, this was rejected and they subsequently asked Easton to record an entirely new theme. Blondie eventually released their song on the 1982 album The Hunter. The soundtrack was released on LP at the time, but it wasn't until 2000 that it was given an expanded release with 6 bonus tracks. You can find it relatively easy on CD, or you can just go on iTunes and buy it from there. It's definitely worth picking up. I listen to the soundtrack a lot and it's now become one of my favourite James Bond soundtracks. Sheena Easton's song is not that bad. It grows on you the more you listen to it, but it's no View to a Kill, which is my favourite song of the Roger Moore series. For Your Eyes Only is regarded by fans as the more serious of the Roger Moore movies. It certainly takes a more basic approach and reduces the number of gadgets and outlandish set pieces, but still comes with the humour that defined Roger Moore's Bond outings. The strange thing about the film is the one I often forgot about. I usually often saw the opening or the ending when flicking through the channels as a kid, but never got the chance to sit all the way through it until it turned up on DVD. I found when discussing the movie, people often remember the title song but never recalled what actually happened in it, which is probably a result of its thin storyline and less than memorable villain despite a good performance by Julian Glover. For me, I grew up watching Roger Moore as James Bond. The movies, as far as I can recall, were frequently on TV more so than Sean Connery's. Now, this is not to say I think Roger is the best Bond, but I do have a soft spot for his portrayal. I always enjoyed his performance despite it being less than serious than Sean's. But with Roger's added humour and charm, it's hard not to like him in the role. At the time, his movies were huge, so audiences were enjoying his interpretation with his less than serious approach. This was probably the ideal time for him to bow out. Octopussy and A View to a Kill, he was unfortunately showing his age. With Octopussy going up against Never Say Never Again, it would have been silly of Eon Productions to replace Roger, so he had to return. With the majority of Bond fans, they love it when the producers and writers stay faithful to the books and going with a more hard-edged version of the character, and with this movie they try to do that, but also they fail to take advantage of Roger's acting abilities. They zap out the humour and the charm of his character to a certain extent. It ends up being a different version of Roger's traditional Bond. Roger at the time didn't notice it was taking a more serious direction, but as mentioned earlier in the video, he did question Bond's actions as he kills off Locke by kicking the car off the cliff. Now, this movie is not suddenly the first one in Roger's outings to be the serious one. If you watch The Man with the Golden Gun, he is pretty aggressive and serious in that movie. A key scene when he intimidates Andrea Anders, so it's not just isolated to this film. What I love about the movie is that Bond has to use his wits to get through the danger he is put under, him doing what a spy should do, and he is investigating the killers of Melina's parents and the whereabouts of the ATAC. It doesn't rush the mission, but keeps at a pace for things to slowly develop, but probably a little slower than what I would want. Bond movies are often defined by their villain and set pieces. With For Your Eyes Only, with its attempts to cut back on what was done before, especially with The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, you have a movie that could be seen as a substandard entry in the series. With its action sequences, they are what you've seen before, apart from the rock climbing scene, which is the most impressive. Every Bond film has a car chase in one form or another, and the ski chase is taken from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. With every Bond film, the action scenes are all very impressive and done by the best in the industry, but you can't help notice you've seen it all before. With it being the 12th in the series, it's hard to keep things fresh, which is a difficult challenge, so most action scenes just become variations of what you've seen previously. I suppose with it being John Glenn's first outing as director, he has decided to play it safe. Julian Glover is a great actor, but a very forgettable villain. He doesn't do much apart from his double dealings with the British and Russians, and by the end he just gets stabbed in the back by Columbo. Just a wasted opportunity. There is so much more they could have done with him. He is portrayed as ruthless and just wants money, which is generic as you can get for a bad guy. Julian does the best with what he is given, but there hasn't been much thought put into his character. With the DP, Alan Hume, taking on the role of lighting the movie, it does unfortunately look less spectacular than the others, with it going with a more earthy colour design, and in keeping with things in reality, it does look less appealing than say with Octopussy and A View to a Kill, which Alan also photographed. I think Alan Hume is a fantastic cameraman. He also photographed Supergirl, Life Force and Return of the Jedi, which all look great. I just think this was probably the weakest out of the big budget productions he worked on during the 80s. The costume design for the movie is pretty sickly. Roger's outfits hardly seem what James Bond would wear. He is wearing similar shirts your granddad would wear in the summer. But hey, it's early 80s fashion. The action is very good, it's choreographed well, and shot at some great angles, but they are a bit too long. The ski chase, which starts out well, but after a short while you end up looking at your watch thinking, this is dragging on a bit. Then the bobsleigh scene kicks in and you think, oh, this is getting good again. The submarine scene where they get attacked by another henchman is a great sequence, but the whole set piece really drags out. They find the ATAC, then kill the guy, then escape, then get attacked again. There is this seesaw effect with its pacing. They could have easily trimmed the movie down by 15 minutes. The story isn't strong enough to hold up against its 2-hour runtime, and padding it out with long action scenes is not the way to justify having it run that long. There is less focus on Bond sleeping around. He only gets with 2 women. Melina is a romantic element of the film and they finally get together at the end. He pumps Columbo's mistress for information in the classic Bond way, but it's good to see they are trying to push a romantic element that runs throughout the movie. But in the end of the day, Roger is way too old for Carol. He is 53 and she is 24, a bit of an age gap. What do I think really works in the film? Going with a simple approach and back to basics for Bond is a great idea. It works for the majority of the film. Less gadgets and using his brains to get through the dangers he faces is perfectly fine, but removing gadgets doesn't suddenly make a better film. The gadgets are always a great inclusion, but just using them sparingly and when needed is what you come to expect from the character, and just eliminating them is not always the best direction. Seeing a darker side of Roger's Bond is great. I love the whole face-off against Locke. It's what you'd see in a Timothy Dalton film. The one gadget they use is the computer system to identify Locke. The graphics seem very childish with its design. So much more could have been done to make something more believable. It seems whoever designed the graphics that were used was so out of touch with technology. You could see far superior graphics in, say, Alien from 1979. I think they should have employed a computer expert and graphic designer to create something more detailed and real. The movie still retains a lot of the silly elements that were apparent in all of Roger's series. The opening is totally bonkers. Dropping Blofeld down a chimney is a great set piece, but totally out of place with this apparent serious direction for the film. Topping it off with a bizarre ending, talking to Margaret Thatcher on the phone. Imagine Pierce Brosnan talking to Tony Blair in The World Is Not Enough, for example. Audiences would laugh their asses off. It would feel so out of place. The PM was always mentioned in the series, but only as a passing comment by Bond's superiors. But the PM should never be shown on screen. I think this was a silly move on the filmmaker's behalf to have her in this. I've probably raised more negative aspects than positive ones in this review, but despite that, when I do watch it I still find it entertaining. Yeah, it's flawed in many areas, mainly being its villain and less than interesting story. It has a largely forgettable plot. It makes up its shortcomings by throwing in great action and reducing its outlandish set pieces and campy moments. The performances are all generally very good. Topol is probably the best of the supporting actors, and he always delivers when you see him on screen. Carol Bouquet does have this blank expression throughout the film though, like she has no clue what's going on, and it's hard to judge her performance fully with her voice being dubbed over. Roger Moore just breezes through it and never falters. The TV series Archer, I noticed they kind of homaged this movie with its storyline of the German girl chasing after Archer. He tries to avoid sleeping with her because she is too young, which made me think of BB chasing after Bond. I thought that was a great wink to the original movie, if it was intended. For Your Eyes Only has a more consistent tone throughout thanks to John Glenn directing, and the score by Bill Conti really amps up the visuals to give you, the viewer, a stronger sense of excitement. It's not the best out of Roger's films for me personally. I think that award should go to the film The Spy Who Loved Me. If you are a fan of James Bond, then you've probably already seen it and own it. Most fans have the box sets. If you haven't had a chance to see it or haven't watched it in years, I'd certainly recommend it, but don't suddenly think it's going to be a super serious Bond film in Roger's catalogue. It does dial back the silly comedy but also throws in some odd scenes. It's a fun movie with a great soundtrack and the usual solid action scenes you come to expect from the Bond filmmakers. It goes in the right direction but just doesn't fully deliver for me.
After our last meeting, I am asking myself why you want to know about Locke, Colombo's man. Now, I know Colombo runs heroin to be refined here before it is sent to England. But I must warn you, stopping Colombo will be difficult. He has important connections. You cannot just arrest him. You must find a different way. You may have to kill him.
Just tell me where he is.
In Indaxi. It is Christatos' figure, not me. He told you about himself. He's the one with the powerful connections.
Why should I believe you?
Well, I'll prove it to you tonight. We'll go together to his warehouse in Albania.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. You have saved us the trouble of disarming it. Apostles, take that.
Let the girl go, Christatos, and I guarantee we'll double whatever you're getting.
I never go back on a deal. It would be bad for my reputation.
I will deliver it and return with the money.
The voice of the KGB. Our agreement was to meet in a place designated by me. After they pay, I will turn the transmitter over to them. It must not be let out of your sight, Apostis.
Oh, mine, Herr Christatos. Where are we going?
We will take the ATAC to St. Cyril's.
Mr. Bond, you have what the Greeks call thrasos, guts.
Serve you, Mr. Colombo.
If you enjoyed the video, you can find more on my YouTube channel, and also you can follow me on Twitter. If you want to help support the channel, you can donate through Patreon and receive monthly perks such as updates on the latest news on my channel, early access to reviews and commentaries before they go live on YouTube. Even the smallest donation can help keep this channel going. Thank you.